from what it seems like, the run game is still not doing the Bears any justice. And although we've seen a lot of positive news through camp so far, the running back position has still been less than ideal. Reports have been that the run game has not had the best performances. And, keep that in mind because we have arguably the best defensive line in football. So obviously they're going against some really tough players like Khalil Mack and Akeem Hicks. And, Bilal Nichols reports are that Roy Robertson Harris is doing really well in camp this year so far too. But I just wanted to kind of talk about how this is going to be a real issue for the Chicago Bears if we can't get this thing going.
Yeah, no, I think it's something that, you and I have banked on quite a bit and kind of this team's outlook for success in this coming year. I think that, for them to succeed, running the football has to be a big part of what they're doing well. And I think you and I have kind of said, they'll figure it out, even though they didn't really make too many changes along the offensive line. But, a new offensive line coach in Juan Castillo, maybe he'll right the ship and get things going where it needs to go. And, right, like you said, we haven't really quite seen what we wanted. And I think that it really boils down to offensive line issues. I think we can look at that backfield and, Montgomery isn't a perfect back, but I think that, us as Bears fans kind of know that he has the talent, he has the ability to run well, especially in between the tackles. So a lot of it comes into what's happening in front of him and the amount of time he's getting to make decisions. And, it's still not happening, which is very frustrating.
Yeah, this is going to be a huge issue for the Chicago Bears this year if they can still not get any sort of run game production. And it's going to reflect really negatively on Matt Nagy, especially when he was coming to Chicago with a huge year for Kareem Hunt when he was play calling for him. They did really, really good with him. Obviously, some statements made about the playoff game and his usage there. So usage concerns is not necessarily a very, something that Matt Nagy isn't accustomed to, but at the same time, Matt Nagy did have Kareem Hunt for a huge season of his, made him look like an amazing player that season. And really, my concern is this the offensive line or is this the personnel we have at the running back position? And I think that it can be a little bit of both, but I've been kind of trying to weigh the options. Is it the offensive line? Is it the running back? I kind of have been leaning towards more probably offensive line issues because I know you can find running backs that can, do better than what the offensive line gives them. But at the end of the day, when you don't have a hole to run through, especially if you're more of a player that operates off their vision and lateral quickness and really twitchy ability like David Montgomery, you're going to have a hard time. David Montgomery isn't necessarily a speedster. He can't just take a little hole and, make the most out of it. He really has to, you have to kind of give him a good enough hole and then he can make his money after that. So I don't know what you attribute it to more though, Reece.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of saying before is I think it's mostly on the offensive line, right? I think that just the small shift in personnel that we've seen, and even with the new offensive line coach and Castillo, I think that it's still a little too much of the same. Now we'll have to see how it progresses throughout the season. They'll have to do some adapting once they actually get some game footage and a feel for what opposing defenses are doing against them. Because you made a good point about how it goes in training camp. I mean, you do get a sense of familiarity when you're playing against if you're the Bears defense playing against the Bears offense and kind of knowing what to expect. So it's not always the best judgment, but at the same time, I think that most of it does fall on the offensive line. I think that, like I said, David Montgomery isn't perfect. I think that he's good enough, though, with a decent offensive line to go out there and make some good things happen. And I think it's just disappointing mostly overall because I think the Chicago Bears are relatively known as a franchise that runs the ball pretty well. Even in our worst years, we've generally found pretty good running backs. I mean, Matt Forte was honestly probably, in the franchise's terms, going to be kind of underrated just because of how many great running backs there have been. But he had, a very good stretch of very successful football in the league. So, whether you go back to there or Thomas Jones or, a litany of other good running backs, it's just kind of a shame that it seems like that's kind of died off. And in a way, it's a product of what the NFL is today. But as we talked about before, some of the best football teams out there are running the football more than ever. So,
well, that kind of hammers on the head my concern for this team right now. It's like, why why are we not, addressing the offensive line more? Why are we so insistent on keeping the personnel we brought in and not really looking in free agency to improve this? We have $20 million in cap space right now. That's quite a bit. That's really good for a team right now, and that's partially because of players we had opt out, which was unfortunate for us. But hey, we can go out and sign, Josh Klein, who's probably going to get like a $5 million a year contract, something very reasonable, especially for his performance. He did a good job with the Vikings there as well. And, why don't we add another running back? I think that, Reece, you and I have really been calling for the Bears to add someone with maybe a little bit more consistent and proven talent at that position, rather than rely on young players having seasons that they have not had yet. So someone I kind of look at maybe as a potential ad for us would be, Leonard Fournette. And I know that this might be a bit of a shocker because he hasn't performed all that great so far. And he has, issues that he can be described with as well. Some character concerns there, locker room concerns there as well. But it looks like through camp so far, he's really kind of changed his mentality with the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he's been working harder. And, he's definitely someone who comes with a level of proven production and could provide us a running back who is probably faster than anyone we have on the roster, even though he's not necessarily, obviously besides Tariq Cohen, but like a regular build running back that's fast. And then also a guy who has a ton of power as well. I think he'd be a great addition to this running back room.
Yeah, and kind of off that line, it's not like, he's had the best offensive line down there in Jacksonville either, so
quite the opposite.
Yeah, so he would be kind of, maybe even in a better situation than he was before. I don't know if Leonard Fournette in particular is the solution to it, but I agree with the sentiment of it. And I think that, Leonard Fournette does pose an interesting person whenever you bring up someone like him where it seems like his potential hasn't been fully tapped into yet. You feel like there's still a little something extra there, kind of like an elite level season or two from him that can be scraped out. So, he's kind of an interesting idea, but I think there's, quite a few people. We talked about Devonta Freeman in the past, not sure if he's still out there as a free agent target or not.
Oh, he is.
But, like even someone along his lines where, right, he does bring that different element of speed as opposed to a regular running back. But I think that there's options out there, and I think they can go out and play on it. But I think that Artavis Pierce, if they end up relying on him, won't be an awful, an awful person to plug into that position.
I'm still starving for proven production, a proven player, someone to really add to this running back crew that doesn't have a notable name there to kind of lead them and show them how to play the game. You look at, we're going to actually about to get to him in a minute, but Jimmy Graham, what he's doing for Cole Kmet, he's kind of able to mentor him, help him along the ropes. And really, we brought in Mike Davis last year, but is that really a good guy you want David Montgomery and Tariq Cohen to learn from? Not in my opinion. So, and hey, I'm not going to say that, Leonard Fournette would potentially be the most helpful and best locker room guy either. I think actually quite the opposite, but maybe someone like a Devonta Freeman, bringing him in could really also help mentor these younger running backs. Hey guys, like our video, subscribe, and check out our bi-weekly podcasts on Apple Podcasts. Thanks.